Hi, I'm John,
And I'm Meredith.
and this is No Talking in the Library, once again coming to you from remote locations around the globe, around the eastern Cleveland metropolitan area. So, once again, we thought we would have a little conversation about things we've been watching, things we've been doing while we're social distancing. Try to turn you on to some things that you can access via the library, but also just sort of things that we've been watching and things that we've been enjoying lately. I feel like you're brimming over with
I
something to say
know.
right now, so just why don't you go for it?
Like I just said before we started recording, literally 10 minutes ago, I finished watching A League of Their Own.
Oh yeah, absolutely fantastic movie. I mean, just un-
unarguably,
unarguably,
unarguably a classic.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely,
1992, Penny Marshall,
yeah,
about the All-American Girl Professional Baseball League that happened in the 1940s. Now, here's the thing about this movie. Great movie. I love this movie. Who doesn't love this movie? Rosie O'Donnell, Madonna, Gina Davis. Everybody's in it.
Tom
Tom
Hanks,
Hanks. Tom Hanks, yeah. But I was trying to think in like the last few minutes here of a movie that so steeply declines for me from the beginning of the movie to the end of the movie. I almost never watch like the last 30, 40 minutes of this movie.
hmm,
About about the point when I have a lot of things to say about Kit. I'll get to it in just a second, but
sure,
about the point where Kit gets traded to Racine
right,
and then Bill Pullman shows up, I turn
right,
it off. And you know my feelings about Bill Pullman, which I'm not going to get into.
fair enough,
But I almost never watched the end of this movie. I watched all of it tonight, and I was at a certain point like was not sure like what was happening. Like it goes back to the movie starts in the present when they're opening the women in baseball exhibit. I think it probably is the Baseball Hall of Fame, and it goes back to that. And I was like, I feel like I've never seen this before.
right, right, yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, this just to sort of break in for 1 second,
Yeah,
I absolutely agree. I love this movie. I love it absolutely to death. I mean, it's great as a sports movie. It's great as a story about people finding their ability to do something that they didn't know that they could do. Uh, it's one of those things too about. So just to digress for half a second,
mm-hmm.
um, I grew up as kind of a jock, let's just say, and
Same.
yeah, right. Yes, you
Yeah,
did.
hard same.
um and but in the sort of dude world of jobs, it's easy to sort of um you get sort of programmed with this idea like, oh, like girls are less competitive, right? That's like a fundamental difference, which is completely untrue. I've since learned. I had the opportunity a few years ago to coach girls tennis at the middle school level, and it was really eye-opening for me, not just because they were really great people, but because they were super competitive. It manifests in a slightly different way, but
Yeah.
they were absolutely no less competitive. And I mean, I think A League of Their Own is a perfect example of this. Like, given the opportunity to play, they could do it at a very high level, and they were very competitive. And it's both things are sort of are
Yeah, and I
ideas that
think
deserve
that's
to be spread.
what I think. I mean, I'm gonna drop some hot, spicy, very relevant takes on you about this movie.
Please do.
First, Dottie was right the whole time. Two, Kit is the worst. And three, Dottie dropped the ball on purpose. I'm gonna lay
Right.
That's my feelings. That's what I'm saying. I'm sticking to it.
Right. So why did she drop the ball just for people who will watch it?
Oh, I'll tell you. So first of all, Kit is the worst. A whole movie, she is complaining that Dottie's always getting in her way and Dottie's always holding her back, and she hates that she's always living in Dottie's shadow. And at the point when the movie sort of transitions to sort of that end, sort of last 30 minutes that I almost never watch. Um, she throws a huge tantrum because her arms, burned out, and Jimmy wants to take her out of the game, and Dottie agrees with him, and she freaks out. And as a super competitive person, I guess I kind of understand it, but at the same time, sometimes you have to know when to take yourself out for the better of the team.
Yeah,
I don't know if you've ever found yourself in that situation.
that's absolutely true. I mean, there's this sort of idea in sports, and once again, this is something we've both lived, where you're sort of expected to play through it. I can remember YMCA summer basketball between my 6th and 7th grade year. About 2 minutes into the game, I caught an elbow in that split my lip, and I went over to my coach. My coach was like, "The greats play with pain." I'm like, "The greats play with pain?" I'm like
Like
12. I mean, come on.
I
But the point is that, like, if you are legitimately hurt, like, the smart play, like, you owe
yeah.
it to your teammates to to make a move.
And in this case, it's not even, I understand like playing through it, when you got to, but in this case, like, this was more of a situation of she was actively hurting the team. And like, I've been on both sides of it. Like, I have played with teams where my teammates have been better than I have, and I'm third line, and when the game is tight, third line sits. That's just, and I've
Sure,
been on
yeah.
both sides of it. I've been first line when I've had to see my teammates lose ice time because the game was tight and we wanted to win it. And I have like the most respect for the people who are willing to put, you know, put the win and the team ahead of themselves. So it's really hard to watch that, like, kid. I'm like shaking the camera because I'm like leaning on my table.
Right.
Uh, watch her throw this tantrum because, she wants to play. Um, and then she blames Dottie for her getting traded, and it's just like one more thing after the other, and it's just like, Kit, like, she's not getting in your way. She's better than you. Deal
Right.
with it.
Right. At a certain point, you have to acknowledge uh, that that there are other people in the world better at you than things, and better than you at things, and you just, once again, for the team. I mean, that's the thing about playing team sports. At a certain point, you have to be about something bigger than yourself, and it's just not fair to everybody out there if you're gonna not approach things in that with a certain degree of humility. um
And that's why
yeah,
Dottie dropped the ball on purpose, because she's better than Kit and would not have dropped that ball for any other reason other than she's sick of listening to Kit like crying and whining about it.
right, right. Well, that's a fantastic movie. Did you is that available on did you watch that on Netflix?
I just happened to have the DVD. I honestly didn't check
Right,
to see if
right,
it was available. Feel like it's not available
right,
streaming. But everyone listening should have definitely have seen this movie already.
right,
I'm just gonna assume you've all seen it.
um, well, speaking of things that one can stream, I was flipping around the Canopy offerings. Canopy is a movie streaming service that's available through the library website, and I found this movie which I think that you will really love. This documentary. It's called The Russian Five. Have
Hmm.
you heard about this?
Is this about like the hockey team?
Yeah, it's about the Red Wings. In the late
Oh,
'80s, the Red
okay.
Wings were absolutely terrible. I took this really, you notice the New York Rangers
Yeah.
hat for any of you who've not seen me around the library sporting my Rangers gear. Um, and they eventually got sold, and they brought in Scotty Bowman to coach, and they also, at the GM level, were sort of looking around for some better players, and this is right around the end of communism, and they bring in five players from the KHL: Igor Larionov, Slava Fetisov, Slava Kozlov, Sergei Fedorov was probably the best of the bunch, and Vladimir Konstantinov, and just absolutely turned the team around. I mean, they also, later on had a whole host of excellent players, but I mean, Sergei Fedorov is one of the best players I've ever seen. I mean, you've heard me
Yeah.
raving time and time again about the qualities of Artemi Panarin. Fedorov, in a lot of respects, a little bit of a different player, but had a lot of the same qualities. I mean, just absolute perfect sense of timing on the ice. Some of the softest hands I've ever seen in my life. And just a really great story about, this is the sort of like end of an era. There had been sort of, people knew that there was a lot of talent in Russia, mostly playing for Red Army Central. There was that moment which we're both quite fond of, with the Miracle on Ice, when the U.S.
Yeah.
national team, bunch of like waifs and strays, managed to beat
Mhm.
the Russian national team. But it's a really great story about sort of America kind of coming to terms with what things were all about, and the fans of the Red Wings saying, like, what is it going to take to get this team to win? Well, if it's going to take these 5 Russian guys, really, we're okay with that, and it's something. It's a really great story about a team I kind of hate, but that's fine. Like,
Well, they're terrible now, so I
well,
guess
that's
it's
true.
ultimately it's irrelevant, but
Right, yeah. I mean, the worm kind of turned again, and they really are. It's
it was
the
a
end.
mercy, right? They were like minus like 160 or something insane. Like,
Yeah, the Red Wings this year are one of the worst teams I've ever
yeah.
seen in the
So
NHL.
really, the season ending early was.
Right, it really put them out of their. I mean, they were worse than 2 years ago. I thought there were college teams that could have beat the Maple Leafs, and but this really, the Red Wings now are really just unbelievably horrific as a hockey team. But uh, so but yeah, that's, once again, you can access that via Canopy. Canopy just has a ton of stuff on it. I've been looking at it in the last couple of weeks, and I've yet to sit down with Canopy and not find something I was interested in watching, which is really, you can access it for free via the library's website. You just have to enter your CleveNet library or your Mentor library card, because not every library has the same digital services. Not every library in Cleveland has the same digital services. So yeah, that made me kind of happy in a hockey sort of way. Well,
Anything else that
yeah, actually,
been
uh,
sure?
I also had a chance finally to see, and this you have to see through Amazon Prime or whatever. 1917,
Oh,
the movie about the First World War. Absolutely unbelievable movie. A better movie even than Darkest Hour, than the movies that came out a couple of years ago. I mean, really just beautifully shot, all shot in one. It's like one continuous shot.
better than Midway?
Um, okay, I think so, and I'll just say this about
Sure.
Midway. People
I think I've
who
seen Midway. I think I've seen most of Midway.
Right. Midway, I think, is a really good movie. It gets a lot of things right. It kind of compresses some characters. Midway is also, it's kind of cool to see what it would look like, uh, to, what it actually did. I mean, they had a pretty good idea of what it looked like when those planes get down on, dive down from 15,000 feet, or 15 or 20,000 feet onto the Japanese carriers. I think that this is in a way a better movie. It's the cinematography, I think, is a little bit better. I think the acting performances are a little bit better. Midway had kind of a sort of cast of thousands feel to
And
it.
1917 is directed by
Oh,
Joe Wright?
yeah, that's
That
right.
right? Let
Yeah.
me
Why don't you look
keep
that up
talking and
while
I'll
I
double check
expatiate it?
that.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, it's the story, for those who haven't seen the trailer or those who have, is a young soldier gets called in. He's told that there's another unit that's sort of cut off from the flow of information, which did happen in the First World War. They didn't have, a lot of the communication was done by like hard cable wiring, and that his brother's in this unit. He has to get to them. They're about to attack. There's going to be attack the next morning. They'll all be killed if the attack goes off, and he and this other soldier have to sort of find their way. And it's I think it's great for a lot of reasons. It's a really great sort of human story about these guys trying to sort of do something which seems impossible, or and trying to survive in a sort of circumstance where uh, the value of human life is at a pretty low ebb. But but it's also, I think, just a really great sort of illustration of what they're pretty unflinching about what World War I was about, and uh, uh, what it was like. Actually, also, for those of you who are interested, I saw also They Shall Not Grow Old, which is the movie where Peter Jackson, who did The Lord of the Rings, etc., took documentary footage from the First World War and just rejigged it using modern film and digital film techniques. So he colorized it very accurately and added sound. Like if you hear all that the newsreel footage and stuff from the First and Second World War, the vast majority of that, like, there's no sound. So if you ever watch like The World at War and like the guys are running around, there's explosions, like those sounds were added later. um so They Shall Not Grow Old is a great sort of, it gives you a sort of real feel for what the experience was like. But 1917, uh a little, not the kind of movie that you and the kids want to like snuggle up with some popcorn for. It's definitely got some very grim stuff in it. I mean, not surprisingly, but a really entertaining movie, and I think time well spent if you have the streaming
I
capability.
was incorrect. It was actually directed by Sam Mendes.
Sam Mendes, that's right.
Yes, I got
That's it.
confused. Joe, that 1917 has like a long, it gives the impression of being all one take, right?
Right, right, right.
Yeah, and I think I was thinking Atonement. Joe writes,
Sure,
yeah, had
yeah,
the storming the beach of Normandy sequence. Is that
right, yeah,
from?
yeah,
Yeah, that's from Atonement.
yeah.
Um, I watched Waco
Oh wow.
on Netflix. It's not a Netflix series. I discovered it is from Paramount's streaming service. Who knew that
Right, right, right,
Paramount had their own streaming service? And this Waco series was actually their like kickoff back in 2018, but it
right.
just dropped on Netflix, so everyone's talking about it again now on Twitter.
Yeah, I
You
remember
haven't
when that
seen
came
any
out.
of this, have you?
I have not.
All right, so this is Taylor Kitsch as David Koresh
Right.
and Michael Shannon as the FBI negotiator Gary Noster, I think his name is.
Mm-hmm.
But my God, what a failure on every level of
Right.
government.
Right. Yeah. The fact that all came down the way it did, and I mean, I remember, I've seen the, I think there was an episode of Frontline about it a few years ago, and that's definitely my impression, that it was just handled so badly, all the
I
way down
will,
the line.
yeah, I will say this series is, it's okay. It's not great. It's not Chernobyl.
Right.
Chernobyl is kind of what I would consider the gold standard of fictionalized retellings of government failure.
Right. Right. Right.
But it's okay. The acting is pretty good. I think Taylor Kitsch looks a lot like David Koresh. I don't think Taylor Kitsch is that great of an actor typically. I mean, he's okay. He was not my favorite member of the Dylan Panthers
Right.
on Friday Night Lights, but he is very good in this. But yeah, it's just it starts with the siege at Ruby Ridge.
Right.
With that failure.
Right.
And goes into them stalking out the compound at Mount Carmel in Waco, and the initial siege of the compound, and then the 51-day sort of standoff negotiations leading to that final day in April. And I actually, speaking of Canopy, the American Experience, that PBS documentary on Oklahoma City,
Right.
which Timothy McVeigh cited Ruby Ridge and Waco as sort of like his, I don't know, his
motivating factors.
Motivation, yeah, for that. And that documentary is on Canopy. I checked today. And I think I've watched that 2 or 3 times because it is just so incredibly chilling to follow what is almost sound logic. It's not like he just woke up on a Tuesday and decided, today I will bomb a building.
Right. Yeah. If you share the problem with Timothy McVeigh, and let's just be clear, the guy was a mass murderer, is that his premises are all wrong. But if you share his premises, the logic of his thought process makes a certain kind of sense. And I mean, this is how he was caught too. I mean, or this is part of how he was prosecuted, that they sort of dialed into the fact that he was like, Ruby Ridge, I could tell you, was someone from the Pacific Northwest, like was a very sort of profound moment for people of a certain political coloration. And so it's not surprising that eventually that would kind of leak out into some into something like Oklahoma City. The thing about Waco is you look at that situation and you think to yourself,
what did you think was going to happen?
Right.
You're literally a group of religious fanatics waiting for the end of days.
Right.
And you
heavily armed.
And you storm in there, like, bringing them the end of days, like.
Right. It's like you you fulfilled the prophecy. Thanks.
Yes.
Right. I mean, like, how could you possibly? It's one of those points at which, like, they actually got to the worst possible outcome. There's no way that could have turned out really worse than it did. I mean,
and it's funny, they, from a little bit of what I was reading about, I think the difference between like Waco, this series, and Chernobyl, which I think is really good, is that there's so much like research and this like figuring out exactly what happened at the plant at every minute, every second. They knew like what buttons were pressed and who gave what command. They knew exactly what happened, how the failures, the breakdown. They knew exactly what happened.
Right.
Like Waco, I mean, nobody really knows. I think they're still debating. Like, the government takes absolutely no blame for what happened. This series completely blamed the government for 100% everything, even the fires, which, from what I understand, they're pretty sure that they were started internally. Nope, the series is like, they just happened.
Right.
Who knows?
Right. Yeah, I've seen
it's hard to see because it's like a lot of it is like, I mean, maybe they got stuck in like the building because like the tanks were like.
Right.
I don't know.
Right. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. That I've seen a couple of the sort of documentaries about Waco, and it's still unclear exactly what happened. Whereas you're exactly right. Chernobyl, they know exactly who did what and when. And that's a remarkable thing about Chernobyl. And we can, we could do a whole episode on Chernobyl, and probably should. But the intense thing about Chernobyl is just that they really do know exactly this was the problem. This guy pushed that thing at this point, and then this is what happened. And but yeah, you're right. This is another reason that Waco is such a sort of forms a kind of like is a kind of fetish for people in these sort of like very hard right type of mindsets, is that it is renderable as far as they're concerned as absolute government, jackbooted thugs, et cetera, et cetera.
I mean, it's hard to, obviously what was happening in the compound, I think the series was actually a little bit negligent in how sympathetic a portrayal they did of David Koresh, because there was definitely like statutory rape happening and marrying, young girls. And this series like skimmed right past it.
Right.
But I mean, that's 76 people who didn't deserve to like, die in a fire.
Right. Yeah. The penalty for that shouldn't be what it ended up being.
A lot of those people probably had nothing to do with I know that there were government agents who died in that siege, but like, I'm pretty sure a lot of those women and children are not firing guns.
Right.
I remember what I was going to say. I was reading that one of the reasons why the ATF and the FBI went so sort of nuclear option, so to speak, was that they were attempting to like save face from the failure of Ruby Ridge.
Right.
Didn't really work out for them.
Yeah, and they were really, there was a lot of sort of fear, I think, at the time in the country, because there had been, there was the whole thing with the order and right-wing, far-right terrorism was being taken a little more seriously at that point, and so the ATF felt like they had to go in hard to sort of re-stamp their authority and show that they could address these situations.
This series was based off of 2 books. One was Waco, A Survivor Story, which was written by David Thibodeau, who was actually one of the few people who made it out. This is available on Overdrive. I haven't read it yet. I put myself, there were some holds, so I haven't read it, so I can't necessarily recommend it. The second is by the FBI agent, Gary Nussner, who's, the name of the book I think might be like Stalling for Time or something like that. I'd have to double check that.
Right.
So no wonder that he was the only government, and that he was a consultant on the series, and I'm not surprised, because he's the only government like official who had any sort of like, this is bad. Everyone else is like twirling their mustaches with their like guns, and they like can't wait to like go in there.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely looks like an interesting series. And Paramount streaming service, I didn't even know.
Is it a thing still? Like, did they make this one thing and then I don't know, I didn't even look.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. I will say though, just before we cut out here, that we finally plopped down the money for the Disney streaming. I'd seen, of course, the sort of the big thing that you want to see from that, but long term going forward, because if you have a 5-year-old clocking around, like sometimes it's what's on Disney. I mean, the service is really great. It's $6.99 a month. What you discover when you look around for children's programming streaming is that Netflix and increasingly Amazon Prime have a lot of like really off-brand stuff, like stuff that was made in like not originally in English, which is fine. I have no problem with that, obviously. But like the dubbing is weird, or they'll come up. There's this one series that was made in Russia. I'm trying to remember what it's called, but like the plots in it are very odd. They reflect sort of cultural sensibility, which is very different than ours. And once again, that's fine. It's just weird. Whereas the stuff that you find on Disney tends to be all very high quality, and at a time like this when people are looking for distraction, $6.99 a month is, I think, a pretty reasonable uh, price to pay if you have the. I mean, we both have PlayStation, so it's a thing that's
Yeah, I also watched Iron Man today in sort of attempt to be like, I'm gonna watch all the MCU movies in order now. I got as far as Iron Man.
That's not that far.
I'll touch back with you guys if I get any farther.
All
I'm
right.
a little bit dreading the Civil War, Doctor Strange, Guardians Volume 2 sort of
Right.
moment, because I really
Right.
not
Civil
like,
War I didn't think was a bad movie, but
yeah,
Doctor Strange I didn't think was that good,
and
and
I
the
really didn't
second
like
Guardians,
Guardians Volume 2. No.
yeah, I didn't think that was very good. But that's maybe something
Yeah,
for a
that'll be,
subsequent.
yeah. One final recommendation from me before we cut out here. Like I said, I haven't read Waco: A Survivor Story, so I can't recommend it. But if that is something that, if you're interested in those sort of events of history, I do highly recommend 1,000 Lives by Julia Shiras. It is about Jonestown, and
Oh wow.
she takes oral accounts of the survivors from that event, and it's an extremely readable. I know that there's like a definitive biography of Jim Jones. I think it's called like Raven, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's
But
right.
it's like it's a big, probably 600 page book. Um, this is very readable. Gives you a really interesting insight into his sort of upbringing and the events of the day and all of that. So, 1,000 Lives. It is available on Overdrive.
All right, that sounds great. Well, that's about all from us for this time. Thanks for watching, and we'll be back again soon, we
Yep.
hope.
Catch you guys later.
All right.